All right, I believe we are live. So, in keeping with many of our videos, we've been announcing open waiting list, and I think that's important because media does such a very sad job of getting it out. So I felt that this would be a pretty good service. So, anyways, my name is Jay. I'm the owner of Section8Consulting.com. We work with about 1,000 clients a year, sometimes a little bit less, and we work with people that are trying to navigate the difficulties of getting housing, dealing with housing vouchers, trying to deal with not only vouchers, but affordable housing, low income housing, which are completely different. They're under subsidies. And then, of course, those of you that struggle with housing in relation to emergency situations, and those of you that may be facing imminent homelessness. So today I want to talk a little bit about Anchorage, Alaska. And one thing I want to make very clear before you decide whether or not you want to watch the rest of the short video, as I've mentioned before, in my 22-year history dealing with Section 8 clients, many places in this country you can receive a voucher and you do not need to live there. Many places in this country you may receive a voucher and you do not need to live there 12 months. And because these are federally funded vouchers, it makes little difference whether you live in Florida and apply for Alaska, or you live in Alaska and you apply for a voucher in another state. These vouchers come with portability. Some housing authorities will grant portability, some will not. That's just what it is. There's not a national database to determine that. And unless they expressly say that they're not going to initiate portability or they're not going to give out vouchers outside the community, then pretty much the entire market across the U.S. is an open field for people to apply. Let's talk about some of the issues related to Alaska and its housing at current. So right now, we do know that through Rent Cafe, they're accepting applications online for the Anchorage Housing Authority voucher waiting list. If you're a member of your family, is a member, or has a disability, you have the right to ask for a reasonable accommodation. And many of you may recognize that as a reasonable accommodation or modification. And some of you may have disabilities or medical equipment which may require additional rooms, but don't think that you're going to be a single person and request a 3-bedroom house. Okay. And also accommodations reach into other things, especially when it comes to whether or not it is reasonable. And I think we miss that a lot. Reasonable doesn't mean that you're going to modify cheap and ask for cheaper rent. Okay. So, if you need help with filling out an application, that could be a situation there. If you'd like to know more information about reasonable accommodations, we've made plenty of videos about that, or you can reach out to AHFC at 907-330-6100, and that's for Alaska. If you're looking for a rental house in the Anchorage area, including Girdwood, Eagle River, and I can't even say the Ellen Nerth, I think, and communities in between, you may be eligible for a voucher in those specific areas. And again, this housing vouchers help low-income households and older Alaskans and other individuals with disabilities afford safe, affordable housing. So I'm going to take a look real quick because I see a few people are commenting. Heather Montero, hello, how are you doing? Well, thank you. Dedicated your time and knowledge. I appreciate that. And you go on to say that you can't express how much that you appreciate that. Well, we've been on here. I've been trying to educate for now 10 years, and I want to make a fine distinction. I am a consultant. Most of the other personalities on YouTube are not consultants. They're here to make ad revenue. I'm not here to make ad revenue. I'm an actual consultant, okay? These are not opinions. I don't make videos about tips and tricks, and I certainly don't dip into the subject matter of one day I'm an expert at fidget spinners, and then today I'm an expert at baking cakes, and the next day I'm a consultant of food stamps, okay? This is what I do. And so that's why I just want to let you know that, because there are lots of people on here that like to share information and wreck lives. Okay. You don't really want to give out advice unless you are a consultant or an expert. Okay. All right. Moving on from that. So let's talk about the subsidies and rental amounts. For most of you are not realizing how much these vouchers could be worth, a good market sample, I would suggest reading fair market rates. You can Google that, and also SAM fairs, or small area fair market rates. Those market rates will closely follow pretty much what they're likely to issue a voucher for. If you take and you apply in Alaska, say you're down in Puerto Rico, okay, and you acquire portability and you decide to port that across the nation, they may bill or absorb, which means they may accept the voucher, or they may port it and then charge the state of Alaska for you being basically in Puerto Rico, okay. But the point is that process takes around 30 days. All right. Let's talk about preferences and lotteries. Now, there should be a distinction. Many housing authorities base your qualifications based on preferences. So, what are preferences? Well, really, if you took that word and you engineered it a little bit differently, how many problems do you have? And which problems do the housing authorities consider to be the kind that's going to move you up and down a waiting list? I'm going to talk about some of them briefly because there's a lot of them. Some matter more than most. So, the top three is going to be whether or not you are disabled, okay? The second is going to be whether or not you have a situation where you're dealing with domestic violence. And the third is going to be whether or not you're homeless. Those are primary preferences that are worth more value than anything else. A lot of housing authorities go, oh, well, we give a preference if you live and work local. Look, that preference is very small. In fact, a person 9,000 miles away with other factors would actually outrank a local person just because of that. And then there are other ulterior or special use vouchers and also preferences that be considered for those of you who are veterans, people suffering from HIV or AIDS under HAPA and BAWA. And so there's a lot of different programs. To date, under Code of Federal Regulation, I could probably come up around 138 so far. So let's move back into the discussion again. So Alaska does require that a family's income be 50% below the area median market. If you move the voucher somewhere else, clearly that would be you would have to match the 50% area median income for whatever area you're going to. The maximum incomes varies and depending on the size of your household. And clearly, here's the deal. When it comes to income and lots of people in the family, the first person is going to be a big chunk, okay? What they consider you to be low income. Each additional person you add in there with an income, it becomes negligible. In other words, the amount in which they considered you as a group to be low income, each additional person, the amounts become smaller and smaller and smaller. That's why people that are single tend to have a better and easier chance of getting vouchers than those in bigger families, because if you've got two working members and they say, all right, one person, we're going to allow 30,000 as the top income line as you being low income. But if you add additional person, they're not going to add an additional 30,000 to that income. They're only going to add like 5,000 or 6,000. So the more people you add, the harder and harder it gets to be low income as a family. That's why seniors are veterans, and it's set up that way for that specific reason, because it's more about people that are seniors, disabled, and so on. Also, want to mention for those of you who are veterans, you would go through almost an independent process that does fall in the same guidelines, which would be HUD BASH. BASH is BASH, and for those of you who have served our nations. First, I'd like to thank you for it. But second, I'd like to say that you may also, in addition to reaching out to housing authorities, you may reach out to your local VA. Now, I'm under no delusion that whether you deal with VA or you deal with the housing authority, the workers aren't always the friendliest people and things don't move quickly. So I'm not going to make any apologies about that. But we certainly do know that there's some separate programs that are funded in separate ways. I would avoid the risk of signing up for vouchers and then getting in HUD VASH project-based housing, because it's pretty bad. All right, moving on from there. So discussing vouchers and discussing whether or not it's a lottery or they're basing on preferences. Lottery means they can just pick anybody. It doesn't matter. It could be an 18-year-old girl that just got out of high school that just simply has a low-income job at McDonald's. It could be anybody. It doesn't matter. It's just totally random. You really can't influence a lottery. Now, if they're basing it on specific preferences, that's where you effectively can change the outcome and timelines of things. And we should also mention, besides utilizing vouchers for housing and with Alaska, that there is what we call low-income housing. Now, many of you tried to tie it all together. They're very different things. You go down to the housing authority, you get a voucher, you get two options. They give you a voucher, and it's called the Housing Choice Voucher, which gives you a choice to take that voucher and go to a private landlord, or they can make an offer of project-based housing. Okay, that is when the housing authority not only issues you a voucher, but the voucher itself in that situation, they're not only the people issuing the voucher, but they're also the people that own the property. Let me give you some advice. First of all, we're all keenly aware of what project-based housing is and some of the people that do the wrong thing in that type of housing. I don't recommend it. And as a company, section8consulting.com, I don't ever help my clients get in project-based housing, okay? Because it's just a little too perilous. Second to that, I would say to you that it'd be better just to have a choice, and use the voucher somewhere else than to have the housing authority, give you the voucher and also be your landlord. It's probably a pretty epic mistake, because if you ever reach a disagreement with the housing authority and they're both control your voucher and being your landlord, you're going to find it very hard to file any complaint and get anything done, okay? Moving on from that, same thing with lotters. Now, going on to, let's group these other subsections: low-income housing, affordable housing, and subsidies. These three magical words all mean the same thing. It means that they're not taking vouchers. They are simply a project. A private owner has entered an agreement under LICH, okay, where they discount the property. So they have 200 units. So they're going to allocate 100 units, and then they're only going to have a requirement that you meet low income status. In other words, you're low income, and then they'll likely make an offer to discount the apartment at maybe 50% of the area median income. No voucher required. Then you have mixed properties, which accept both vouchers and those of you low income. So there is a lot of distinctions being made between those of you carrying vouchers and those of you dealing with low income housing, tenant-based housing, project-based housing, and we can go on for days. The funny thing is the news has done such a poor job. They know that certain keywords tend to drag people more to their articles, so they tend to utilize one phrase and make it mean the same thing for everything. And unfortunately, all types of housing and all types of vouchers are not all the same, and they don't all do the same thing. And when you're applying, you could be applying, and based on your answers, that you could be receiving offers that are funded by different types of things. When I say things, different code of so when you look at a code of regulation, just like you do tax code, you'll see there are subsections of that, and it may be funded different ways. And if that month they're funding people that are homeless, seniors, and veterans, then if they're issuing vouchers that month, those of you that meet those criteria would be considered. The rest of you went in there thinking you had an even chance, when in fact you had no chance. They're not going to tell you what they're funded for that month when they're issuing those vouchers. You'll just simply be eliminated or thrown way back at the back of the list. So if you don't know what the preferences are when they're actually giving these out, then you actually don't even realize you didn't have a chance to start, okay? All right, long-winded today. That's the thing. I want to make sure you guys understand quite a bit about it. One thing I want to tell you about is going to be the timelines with this to be considered for the inclusion on the waiting list for Anchorage, the Anchorage voucher. You must submit your application before Sunday, April 30th, 2023 at 11:59 p.m., or better known as server time. Why server time? Because housing authorities have websites that are controlled by IT and personnel, and the server and the computer reset at midnight, and that's why. Now, every applicant has an equal opportunity to be ranked at the top of the list, whether they apply on the first day or the last day of the month. Now, I think that's a very clever statement that they've made in relation to that. Yeah, you do. Clearly, this is not kindergarten. The first child that races to be at the front of the line it gets to eat, okay? Housing authorities don't operate it, so I'm so glad they point out something so obvious and so stupid. What does matter is your preferences. So if you have effective things that they're funded for, then you're likely to get that voucher and be ranked higher, okay? Now, showing up and ringing a doorbell first is not going to matter. Because you know what? Believe it or not, a lot of people do fundamentally believe it works just like the lunch line when you're in kindergarten. It doesn't. It's not first come, first serve. Let's not kid ourselves. Anyways, if you want to learn more about that, you may reach out to AHFC at 907-330-6100. All right, guys. So in the description of this video, you'll find where you can, almost the near first links that you'll see will be an opportunity for you to apply, consider your answers. Also, remember, most housing authorities have a pre-application and a primary. Most, okay? It means a pre-application, they are looking, what you would think, they're looking to eliminate. So they already know what they're funding for. They're not going to tell you. So they're going to go through that list of pre-applicants to see whether or not you're the right income, you're the right age, and so on. And if you don't pass round one, you don't go into round two when they contact you and give the primary application. If you reach the primary, the odds of you getting the voucher are extremely high. And the likelihood of how far or low, how high up or how low you are will be based on the number of preferences you match and what they are currently funded for. To know that as a PHA, or public, and the key word being public housing authority, public housing authorities are subject to the public and open inquiry, which means open public requests to determine preferences and other information that could potentially show you yield the outcome of where you might be on a waiting list. I would suggest to you that for those of you that don't understand these processes and you intend on applying across a lot of counties and a lot of states, that you may want to seek out professional advice in that respect. But let me be very clear. Just like Medicare and Medicaid, for those of you who are senior, if you could read all the telephone books, rules, and policies, and look, HUD's no different. As a federal mandate and all the different things, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of pages of policies, procedures, data, legislation, code of regulation, Title 24, and so on. When you finally reach a point in your career where you're able to read through all of it, you start to see where the gaping loopholes kind of are. Why do I call them loopholes? Because just like anything that they do in Congress and the Senate, somebody is clever enough to write something in there to allow a back door to make it easier, faster, and simple for constituents. When you're dealing with HUD, people build back doors into this stuff all the time in certain ways to help friends, family, whatever it may be, okay? It's my job to kind of understand those processes and be able to use them to your advantage rather than to your disadvantage. Going into a housing authority with a dollar store, a pen from the dollar store, and jotting down some gibberish and hoping for the best, and then spending 45 minutes telling the caseworker, housing authority employee some really sad song or empathy story is not sufficient to get a voucher. If you don't give these people the right answers, you don't match those preferences, you will never see that voucher. Not 8 years from now, not 15. You'll always be at the end. And it's just like a balloon. Let's think about a balloon. You got 1,000 people that apply. Only 30% of the cases are relevant. The other 70% are not. Now let's take it and we'll move it in two bubbles. Here's 30% and here's 70%. Every new applicant after that 1,000, what does it do? It ejects inside in between those two, which means if you're at the bottom, you're going further and further down, the more people that apply. If you don't reach the threshold of being in consideration the first 50%, you see how that works out? This is why they don't like to issue numbers anymore, because it would be rather upsetting if you jump into you go and apply, 20,000 people apply, and your number was 13,000, right? But you discover a week later, you're not just 13,000, you just rolled down to 17,000. Thus, that would probably cause a person to call, use profanities, threaten people's lives, and all kinds of stuff because they don't understand why they're going down. It's easy. Other people that are more qualified have now entered, submitted an application, and you're just old news. Your case was irrelevant then. Now it's become super relevant the more relevant people come in. And so that's why I always tell you guys, when you submit that application, this is not like going down to Taco Bell and picking up a job. You better watch what you're saying on the application. You better be sure. And let's talk about one of the tougher situations. A lot of questions on applications are designed to work on the mind. And what do I mean by the mind? M-I-N-D. If you ask a question in such a way that it shames a person, then they're unlikely to check the box. But little did you know, if you didn't check that box for that particular answer, it could have cost you 3 years of waiting in your life. In other words, the answers you give can move you up and down a list and cause devastating amounts of damage. And your perception of how you should answer and what you believe should be the answer on some of these applications can devastate your case. Okay? So that's why I tell you guys, before you go and, this is such a long application, this is so much nonsense, I'm just going to give this, an answer. And then I get people calling my office, Jay, they told me I was on a waiting list in 1982. It's now been 68 years. I don't understand why my phone doesn't ring, because you were never relevant to them. Okay. So watch what you check and don't check. And the questions are designed. And if you'd be foolish not to believe this. Look, half the policies and procedures that are underwritten for most housing authorities are done by major universities or companies like Nan and McKay. These super educated children that go to these colleges find all kinds of clever ways to ask questions in a very weird way. It kind of tests that mental limit. Can we shame the person in not answering? And you think it doesn't go on, but we've all taken SATs and other tests, and we've seen very clever questions. If you don't think this doesn't play out with housing authorities, you would be foolish in your methodology and your thought process. So, a lot of stuff, right? We could go on for 28 hours, and all I meant to do was just talk about Alaska and its little old list. A couple of days, we'll talk about another housing authority, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this because I need you guys to understand this is not like anything else in your life you're dealing with. There are two agencies that most Americans hate in this country that are federal. They're like most federal agencies, right? Well, the first one that we all fell in love with and then hated later was the U.S. Post Office. It's federally run, right? It's the most hated. Number two is HUD. And I think HUD's actually getting up there. It's competition. Why? Because out of all the agencies we defund, and then when you defund, what do? We go out and hire the most uneducated, most ridiculous people, and then we put them in the care, and we put them in an office so they can be basically the people that administer and control whether or not people get housing and vouchers. So don't be surprised when you drive your Pinto through the McDonald's window and the 16-year-old girl handing you a cheeseburger. And then later that day at 3 p.m., you drive the housing authority and you're greeted by the same little girl. And she now says she has 400 cases and she's going to be your caseworker. And then she tells you, please don't call here. You're annoying. Okay. Anybody thinks that I'm being foolish about that, I would encourage you to call a minimum of 3 of your closest housing authorities and let me know if they do prayer circles and whether or not they speak to you respectfully. In most cases, most of you probably leave the phone, even if you're good and Christian, probably trading a few profanities with these people, even if they answer, and most of them don't. And they're not going to educate or teach you anything. Most of them don't even, again, once you get them on the phone, their only goal is to get you off. But I couldn't invent it if I tried, but I just tell you my everyday job helping people with this process. I can tell you it's real. There are cases in which housing authorities and its employees are definitely managed professionally and have good conduct. It's just not the average day for most housing authorities. So, as hilarious and interesting as it is what it is. All right, so I want to give an update real quick while I've got to cap the audience. We've had our second litter of kittens. As many of you know, my cats are part of my videos just because as a consultant, it's my channel. So if I want to speak about my cats, I will. If you don't want to hear about me and my cats, then there's always another lady. She makes videos. She was yesterday, she was an expert at being a party clown. Today, she's now a consultant. You can go over her channel, or you can hear about my cats occasionally. So our orange cat had 4 babies. And we're very proud of her. It's been 11 days, and the kittens are starting to open their eyes. The Siamese cat, she surprised us. She went into labor for 5.5 hours, and she had 4, which are midnight black with crystal blue eyes, and she had 1 ghost, a very, very white Siamese. Very interesting. So it's interesting when you have 2 litters in your home because you have 2 battling mothers. So we have 9 new kittens. And of course, I have around 23 rescue cats, most of which are senior cats between the ages of 17 and 24 years of age. So that's the little insight. Hopefully, y'all enjoyed a little peering kind of into my life. If you guys are struggling with housing and vouchers and other issues related to discrimination, housing issues, housing authorities, landlords, or anything that's related to low-income housing, affordable housing, Section 8, and so on, there's very few topics I haven't touched. I would tell you, visit our website, and if you absolutely need to help, then do so. But I encourage all of you to go out and give your best efforts, and only then, and after you've given all your best efforts and it hasn't worked out, that you should probably reach out to our office or any professional that deals with Section 8. And I don't mean the folks in China and Russia that make all these websites that are faceless and nameless. I mean consultants that are actually, who they are. There's real addresses that live in the U.S., okay? Beyond that, I tell you, we're moving out of the winter and springtime, and we're getting closer and closer to summer. So the ability to get vouchers and the number of people are going to increase. So the vouchers will decrease, and the number of people that want these are going to get intense. June, July, and August are extremely intense. It's really tough during those months. The best months of the year to approach this is from October, November, and December are really good. January, February, March, April. And then it starts to really take a nosedive May and go all the way up to about October. And then you get a cooling off again around September. So if you're still struggling with this process, or you're hoping to hang your hat on just applying at one place, let me give you some advice. Most of our clients have approached upwards of 50 housing authorities to probably get 2 or 3 offers. If you're just applying for one voucher, or you're going to sit there sipping coffee while you wait for the housing authority that hasn't been open in the last 13 years to open, all of a sudden, you're wasting your time, okay? You've got to get a lot more applications in, whether it's in the immediate area or not. And again, you do not need to live in the state or county in which these vouchers are often issued if you can acquire portability. All right, I'm going to address some comments real quick. Tommy Thunder hit the top. I appreciate you. Heather goes on to say, question, could you be qualified if you put your physical address, they see you're not even the same state? Again, I want to reiterate, guys, there's nowhere under federal law, when you federally fund a program, you cannot, a state and a housing authority cannot just say, this is only for zip code 77081, okay? Anybody can apply for any voucher anywhere in the country. They gave a little bit of preference if you do work or live there. That preference is insignificant to you being a senior, disabled, and other things. In other words, a person 4,000 miles away with a lot of preference will easily defeat a local, the person works there and lives there. Why? Because living local is not a sufficient preference to really jack you up the list. What's going to get you up a list is things like homelessness, disability, and so on. And I want to be clear about another thing. A lot of you guys say, oh, well, I'm a senior and I'm disabled. Well, so is 98% of the list. Look, in order to qualify really well, you've got to get a large number of preferences. If you don't have the problems now, then you need to look at your life carefully and see whether or not at some point you might have matched that, and then go out there and get the evidence they need. If you know what the rule of policy is, then what you need to do is just work towards it. Now, is it a bit shady? Maybe. And I'm not advising anybody to lie, cheat, or steal. I'm only suggesting if you know beforehand that there are certain preferences to get you where you need to go. If you ain't blind on a Monday, then I would suggest that you figure out a way to be blind by Friday. Now, that's an extreme example and obviously a little bit of a joke, but I think you understand the parallel of what I'm talking about, okay? It looks like I am Serbo. Let's see the kittens. Not just yet, guys. The kittens are only 11 days old. I'm going to be posting pictures. It's important we do not become intrusive over kittens while they're still feeding off their mother, okay? The Siamese are preemie babies, and the other ones have barely opened their eyes. And the more times I disrupt that action between the mother and those babies, the more likelihood she can take those babies and move them out of my home into the woods, and she could also stop feeding altogether. You have to give the cat and the babies space the first couple of weeks until you see that they're not going to become hostile when you come around those babies, okay? You can't handle these things like dollar store toys. What I've learned is they need 2 to 3 weeks, and then you can start slowly getting the comfort of the mother to let you do things. But so I don't want to go snap big, bright pictures on them just yet. I'm posting some here and there. Tina K, can you utilize the voucher in other ways, like towards the purchase of a home? So now that, Tiara, I hope I'm saying that right. We'll just say Miss K. Out of all the housing authorities in America, I would say that a good percentage of them do offer what they call the HUD homeownership program. The thing is, you have to kind of get a list of all your housing authorities for the state and then kind of contact them one by one and see whether or not they offered. 20 years ago, most of them did. Over time, it was unnecessary. So there's less housing authorities that offered. The only way you're really going to know, and since I can't find a national list on that, is just simply by contacting a number of housing authorities and surrounding counties and see whether or not they offer the HUD homeownership program. You may not walk down to the bank with your voucher and then take out a loan and get a house. What you may do is use, rather than that voucher paying the landlord's mortgage, you may use that voucher to the amount of money that was be given in that voucher towards your mortgage, okay? So it'd be a 30% responsibility of your income based on the principle of being subsidized 70% against the mortgage. Now, if the U.S. government's going to subsidize 70% of your mortgage over a 10 or 15-year period, I would say that's probably the best deal in America. But let's make no mistake in saying that, utilizing that program it's difficult and it's a lengthy process, and you still need to meet some lender requirements. If you're walking around and you're burning every credit card you got and you're never paying your bill, and your credit history is filled with trash, you're going to have a difficult time. That's not to say that those of you with low credit scores are not disqualified, but if you're a serial not payer, nobody's going to consider, because you, even though the housing authority is going to allow you to utilize the voucher to do so, it doesn't mean the lender will. And so lenders like Fannie Mae and Fannie Mac, they can deal with those that are on fixed incomes, as little as $500 a month. It just depends. And credit scores that are very low. But I would not advise credit scores really under 620, because then you're dealing with predatory lenders. And housing authorities, and the way they've set this up, they do restrict who you can actually get loans through to avoid loan sharks. But unless you want a stupid interest rate, and let's be honest, why buy a $300,000 house if your interest rate is so high that when you pay it off, you bought a $500,000 house? How does that make any sense? So yes, to answer your question, sorry for the long-winded thing. That's the way my mind works. You ask me a question, I'm going through every code, regulation, and policy that I can think of, and then I'm trying to combine all that information in my head, and then I'm trying to condense that in an understandable way. Because to be honest with you guys, if I started verbatim federal code and other things as it's written, you guys would be baffled in some cases, and those of you that are highly educated would get it, but it wouldn't do any of us any good, because to be honest with you, after I read all the information out of policies, procedures, and operations manuals, the reality comes to me that a lot of that stuff that's written in there is just fluff. If they actually got to the point, I think that a lot of policies and procedures and data manuals and all that would probably be 1/100th the size they are. But the fun thing about that is when you want to write policies for the government and they pay you by the word, it's in the interest of the kids at the different colleges. And if you're paying them by the word, then there's every incentive for them to create these exasperated policies the size of 15 telephone books. If we quit paying by the word for them to underwrite these policies, we would have very short and concise manuals, but we don't. That's government involvement, is the convolution of policies. And then it all gets rolled down to the housing authority. So we had this elaborate process to create as much nonsense in these manuals as possible. And then you read it all, and then I've got to condense it down to what actually makes sense, and then be able to apply that in my efforts to deal with clients. In leaving you guys, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the link in here. And this is if you guys are struggling with housing. Again, you do not need to pay anybody. You can call 211. They've got experts there that'll give you a couple of minutes before they giggle and hang up. You may call the housing authority, but you may be left having to go back to church and pray to Jesus because of some of the naughty words you said and the frustration that you might ultimately feel when they hang up on you. HUD is very professional because they're ministers, and they may answer questions too, but unfortunately, they don't often have the time to sit on the phone with you for a half hour, an hour, and their job is not so much to give you vouchers. Their job is really to address bad behaviors on the part of housing authorities. And that is the realm of the free world. And just like Mama used to say, for most of you that have a mother, anything that's free, you get what you pay for, really, in this world. It hasn't changed any, has it? That old saying, that's how it goes. You call these free lines, and what you're going to find is a lot of people going to pawn you up somebody else. Give you a good example. I had a social worker today reach out to our office, 60 voucher holders, and they want my office to go and find these people housing. That would be an astronomical bill. Everybody knows looking for housing is the world's biggest pain in the ass. Why would my company want to spend 5,000 hours on the phone to help people find housing? I'd rather see you guys get a voucher. I think that's a better use of time, because there needs to be a little pain in this. You know, if we're able to help clients get vouchers or get them through that process, then I think there should be a little bit of work on the part of the client, which means go out and find your own apartment, deal with private landlords, put a little effort, put a little bit of your own effort into it. You're never going to be proud of something that you don't put of your own effort and sweating glory into. And so, and again, it would be administratively impossible for us to go out and seek housing for our people. We'd have to call hundreds, if not thousands, of properties and then keep up with all that. And there's all kinds of legalities that would present with having to have durable or limited power of attorney of a person to speak on their behalf. And so you see how that can get complicated fast. All right, guys, I want y'all to enjoy your night. We'll be back again talking about another housing authority, and I'm going to be again this month talking about disabilities and how that's going to play into this process. And I think we'll make further videos in regards to portabilities, moves and portabilities, and billing and absorbing, and some of the processes you need to do to snatch a voucher in one place and cheat the line in another state. It's the oldest game on the planet, but if not done right, then it goes badly. Okay? Y'all enjoy your night, and I hope to give y'all a video about the kittens for those that are pet lovers and enjoy that part. I'm definitely hoping to give y'all a video soon when it's appropriate, okay? Good night, and y'all have a great day.